Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
Adam Schomer, we are talking about selling Superman. This is the perfect fit. People don't realize how relatable the character of Superman himself is to most of American society because it is an immigrant story. And when the character was birthed by Siegel and Schuster, you know, it was that time of war, you know, post World War I, leading into World War II, and a lot of people couldn't go home. So it's this, I don't belong in the new world, but I have no home world to go to. So that's what really made Superman relatable.
Beautifully said. It's so true. Yeah, and the family dynamics, or not having parents, and what do you serve, or who do you serve? Serving people, what's right, what's just. I think that a lot of that comes from that justice. You know,
but the documentary also plays into that a little bit. I mean, you have this family with a different type of hoarding. It's not like the dad hoarded just random newspapers from like the 60s and that was it. He had over 300,000 comic books with the second top grade of Superman #1. Not Action #1, but Superman #1, the very first book with his own name on it.
Yeah. So is it hoarding? Is it obsession? Is it collecting? It's kind of a mix of both. Fixation, you know, he had a condition called Asperger's, which is ASD, on the autism spectrum now, but back then didn't go diagnosed so much. He didn't quite know. So yeah, there's a lot of fixation that happened. He knew what he was doing in terms of the collecting. He was collecting good stuff, but he wasn't reading them. He wasn't sharing them. He wouldn't let anyone know about it. He was, you know, like things that fan guys like to do, collectors like to share things. So he wasn't doing any of that. And it wasn't just, just tons of stuff of nothingness. Like there was a method to the madness. So it's strange. Yeah,
it's strange, but it's unique. And, you know, we're not going to give too many spoilers, but the aspect of he didn't even let light into the room because he knew light could damage the covers and the way the books were. And, you know, it does cause tension between him and his wife that you need more space for stuff that you're never going to use. But come to find out, just one of the 300,000 books, face value is $3.5 million. And then the question of this is a part of my father's legacy versus, hey, my siblings and I could buy each other homes and completely pay it off. Like you have to figure out the dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, there's a huge inner conflict and struggle, which really does drive the narrative of the story of what would you do and what should you do. What I find the good part of it as a storyteller was that Darren, the son, didn't really need the money. Okay, so he is independently wealthy on his own. He made his own tech company independent of anything. And he doesn't like to brag about that, but he wants people to know that because it's not like, oh, we love my dad now because he left us money. It's still a very painful unboxing. You know how people love unboxing, right? Well, it's not only the books, and there's that fun treasure hunt. There really is. And while we're there filming, a Silver Surfer, you know, they're just finding stuff. It's so unorganized. But he's also unboxing the story and the painful past that really drove his family apart.
Yeah. You know, that whole instance of it's that thing where he still loves his dad, but that disconnect between them in the relationship. And, you know, wow, dad's collection has so much American history. You know, it's essential pop culture Americana, but the history is almost shadowed by the relationship that wasn't the way it could have been between father and son.
Absolutely. And Darren himself loves Superman. His dad Superman was his guy. He does have a Superman 1 through 465, I think it is. His father. So you know, there's a lot more to this collection than the Superman 1 and the Batman #1, which was also a huge book. But yeah, they didn't read it together. It's not they didn't get to. His dad just wouldn't do it. And he even in later years, Darren wanted to go through it with his father and have that, like, hey, let's go through these things. wouldn't do it, wouldn't leave a will of what he wanted them to even do with the comic. So it does set Darren up for like, what's the right thing to do by this? Because it is painful, but it's cool as can be, and he wants to get it in the right hands, and he falls in love with the community. You know, none of that's a spoiler. Like, he kind of falls in love with the comic book collecting community because people are so genuine and have so much fun, and actually, you know, he becomes more and more a part of it, not just selling off books.
Right. And then there is the difference between the collector and the speculator market, because the speculating market is like, oh, how much can I get for this book? What will this be worth? How is this going to go about it? Versus the, you know, issue Superman 384. This one has a personal meaning to me because my grandmother bought the book for me and I lost it. And then I bought it back because this is what started my love of comics, or whatever it is. And it's just interesting to see, you know, because you yourself in the documentary say you weren't necessarily a comic book guy, but now you have a deeper understanding of the community behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Grew up loving Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, watching the Superman movies, but comic books was not in my purview. It wasn't something I was into. So I got to have that nice outsider look. And for the general audience, I'm on the journey with you, understanding how did we get to this level where comics are so important. But yeah, I kind of, you know, as an outsider, okay, and as director of the film, I fell in love with the innocence of the whole community and how much people just love talking about something, right? You know, geeking out in a good way. I happen to love soccer and grew up playing soccer, and I could talk with people about formations and soccer for no reason. It's just fun, you know, it's just fun. And so it's hard not to fall in love with that aspect. And I think people see that a lot of the characters in this film are very open and very honest about their addiction, you know, to comic books, their love of it, how much it's part of their life. And even if it's a little odd to people how into some they are, like you kind of just fall in love with them. They're really, really sympathetic characters. Yeah.
You know, when you go through something like this, at some point there has to be a conversation with Warner Brothers. I've been to the archive museum it's their archives at their offices in Burbank, and we got to see Action #1 that they had to wear white gloves to show us the comic.
Wow.
You know, I have a reprint so I can go through it and read it myself, but it's not the same as having that 1938 version. And then, you know, when you get to see this comic in hand, do you ever get a chance to go to Warner Brothers themselves at the DC offices and like get it authenticated and have it checked out, and what, like, you know, the publisher's opinion of what the book looks like?
No, never there. We went to CGC, you know, the grading company that grades it. So they're the ones that authenticate it. And we, you know, we did see the Superman not in a case, right? We did see it being touched, and they're not wearing white gloves at CGC. That kind of blew my mind. That no, they're like, you're more apt to tear something if you use a glove. So yeah, we got to go down to CGC in Florida and see them open the book and smell it. Right, these are books from 1939, right? And you know, and he's just there's something about the smell of it. So I haven't been over to Warner Brothers, but I'm hoping they call me soon so that because they want to, you know, buy the rights to the film and stream it.
That's what I was thinking. I thought this would have ended up on Max at some point because Superman is owned by Warner Brothers. Well, let's hope so. Yeah,
it definitely still could, because we're just coming out on a video on demand right now. And for sure, all the streaming rights, you know, the doors are open, and we're talking to the streamers. So I think it'll be a great place to end up. Obviously, right? DC is there, and Max has such a great reputation. So, you know, it would be nice to be rub shoulders with Mr. Gunn there.
Yeah. Hey, you know, have him put his name as an executive producer credit on it, and then everyone's going to start watching it.
There you go. Yeah. Why not?
Listen, sometimes that's all it takes, you know.
It's fine. Totally. It would be a great home for it. I think, I think Max would be a good place. Warner Brothers in general, right? Which I believe in companies, Discovery as well, and many others. Yeah.
You know, you can have your run with 90 Day Fiance right next to it. So.
Yeah, I don't know how much they would like that, since I take a little jab at reality TV there in episode 2. But you have to. I mean, if you're in this industry, you have to be open to like, a little bit of jabbing ourselves, right?
Oh
Of
yeah.
like how ridiculous reality TV is, how kind of ridiculous it is that Batman and Superman fight each other all the time, and like we're out of ideas. So I hope they don't take that too personally. Like we all can laugh.
Listen, if there's money to be made, no one takes anything personally.
I guess so. Yeah, if we can get the eyeballs in there, like no problem.
Yeah. How was this document, this notion of this presented to you? Did you read the article that like, hey, this hoarder guy has Superman #1 that's worth $3.5 million, or did you know Darren personally? Like, how did the relationship develop?
Yeah, the first news about it came actually over a year and a half after we started filming. So I knew Darren from high school. So we played soccer together in high school. He's a couple years younger than me. So we knew each other. I knew his dad. His dad was very nice to me, super cool. And then, 30 years later, he calls me up. We had been in touch a little bit about business stuff and tech, but he said, you guys didn't know this. No one knows this. My dad passed away a year ago. We've been, moving the books into a cool security place, but this is the secret. This is the 40-year secret. We haven't told anybody. I mean, and that blew me away. Like 4 rooms, 5 rooms of a house and kids, and really it stayed secret, and it did. I mean, that's hard to do. Like there's no way I could have kept that secret from any of my friends. Oh, excuse me. But so it blew my mind, and I said, okay, let me come film you guys. I'll come for one weekend over Thanksgiving, and that was me alone with a camera, and that's like episode 1 is me in their old house before it sells. I wanted to walk through the past with them and see the marks were still there in the carpet from the books.
Yeah, just the weight of all those books.
Oh my, yeah, just the weight, exactly. And then we couldn't walk in some of the rooms. So it's like it's a hoarder, but there's an organized hoarderness to it, and so that I really really love episode 1 for that, because it's so raw, authentic. The access is so like just clean in that way. It's just me. There's no other crew, and I'm just like hanging out with them, and they're just telling you stories. I love that kind of documentary filmmaking, and then of course, we go into the cool shots and the real higher end production as well. We have a nice mix in this film.
Right. There's one thing that Darren says that is heartbreaking, but it's very understandable in that here we are. I've become this new story based on his collection of comic books and the Superman #1 and Batman #1 and all these other books that he's had. Yet I haven't even had time to mourn and process the loss of my father. And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the most heartbreaking things that you hear in the documentary, because here's a man longing for a relationship, trying to reconcile what it could have been versus what it was, and find the balance between the two. And yet he's not given the opportunity to go through the grieving process.
Yeah, I think we all do that sometimes, right? We busy ourselves, and we all, we take on the, hey, what do I got to do with this, and the logistics, and maybe forget to take time to mourn and to just emotionally process. And I think part of that's society, part of that's how we grow up, and part of that's the busyness of life. And part of what I think making the film forced Darren to do was be asked these questions and to look at some things, because that's where I come from. I love the inner world. I really do. And it's not often you get to sit with your buddy's mom and go, hey, what'd you like about Dale? And she's like, oh, you married the devil, my father was like this. And you're like, oh my gosh. You never hang with your friends' families in that detail. You could know them for years. So for Darren, I think it brought things up really fast. And, that press that you mentioned that did come out about him with CBS and Detroit Free Press about a year and a half into filming, that really shook him. It really, really did, because trolls came out on the internet. People were reacting the wrong way to the CBS interview. And in some ways, he answered in a probably nicer way because it was in the news, and he wasn't as, I think in his words, as authentic as he wanted to be. He didn't tell the bad side, right? It was just like, hey, Dad, you did it, and no, they don't really feel like that. It's not like a, hey, Dad, you did it kind of thing. Like, it was all worth it, Dad. That's not the feeling. But they are trying to rewrite it. But it's not really a redemption story, and that's the hard part. If someone's gone, it's hard to the grief is still there, and if you haven't processed the relationship with someone that's gone, it can be even harder, and sometimes we turn it back on ourselves, which we talk about a little bit with a therapist in the film.
Right. And then there's also, since you guys played soccer, where's our league championship trophy? There's no room for that, but there's these boxes that we can't open that have taken up, that.
How'd you know we won the league, man? How'd you know that?
I'm just guessing. Yeah, I'm just guessing.
I think we did one year. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for reminding me.
See, there you go. Now we got to dig up your trophy.
No, my parents just reminded me, like, I played soccer at Ivy League school. We won the Ivy championships, and they're like, "Where's your Ivy ring?" And I lost that thing. But I'm not a collector. The things don't mean anything. I know the experiences. That's how I've led my life, is more like experience driven, and I tend not to hold on to things. My dad loves collecting. His dad won't hold on a thing. My grandfather, I found out, from my dad, just because doing this film. He's like, no, Grandpa didn't collect a thing. If it didn't have a use or a tool, he tossed it. And that's why he tossed my father's comic books as well.
Which is probably why your dad's going through Darren's dad's comics and going, I had this one at one point in time or whatever.
He was really excited because we brought him to the collection. It's in one of the bonus features. I interview my father, and we talk about that stuff. So, making a movie like this, it got to bring up stuff for me too. I got to learn more about my father, and, to bring it back to Darren, I think it was very courageous for him to let us in on the grief process while he's going through it. It's one thing to have been through it and to retell it in the way you want people to see. And it's another thing to be going through it. And, the series starts off with him not wanting to do the movie anymore.
There's an aspect of this because you have everyone coming out of the woodworks with their own version. Well, I'd sell it. It's $3.5 million. And then, other people's ideology of, well, this was your dad's. You should keep it because you don't need the money. And going back and forth in these discussions, do you donate it to a museum? Do you do all different types of aspects of this? Let's put you in his spot personally.
Okay.
If it was your situation, what would Adam do?
Me, the way I've lived my life or how I grew up, I would sell it in 10 seconds. I would probably, the big books have graded and do those the right way, but the bulk of the collection I would give to someone that knows what they're doing and kind of sell it off. So I wouldn't maximize the money in that way, but I wouldn't want to have to go through it. Because I'd like to use that money for other things. As one of the guys says in episode 4, you take something you love and you turn it into something else you love. And the money's in between. So that's how I would approach it. Now, if Darren, if my father was his prized possession, all right, so if I was actually in Darren's shoes and I said, oh, this is my dad's favorite thing, and this is what he's spent his life on, it would be hard to sell it, especially if you don't necessarily need the money. It's a really cool thing to hang on to, like that Superman one, that Batman one. That's cool. So I probably wouldn't rush into that. If I was him, I really, I know I'll just say this. I don't want to give any spoilers. My feeling at the beginning of starting filming was, oh my gosh, sell that. That's all the pain. It's your whole thing. You need to let go of it, burn it. Kind of like the ring in Lord of the Rings, kind of burn it. In this case, just sell it off, move on. And by the end, I'm as a director and friend, I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. I bought into the nostalgia of it by the end. And I hope that's what audiences feel too. When you understand the community and you understand people's nostalgia to these things, you go, oh, maybe I wouldn't either. And I love in episode 2 when, I asked this Josh, the hatchback kid, and his dad, what would they do with it? And they could use the money. That is for sure. Because that guy, Josh has a lot of health issues. And to hear his response was just, it blew my mind.
There's an interesting, we can put it this way. You can put it behind the grandfather clock in the Batcave and, hoard it for yourself at that point. It's interesting to see the different perspectives, the different worldviews. And that's what I love about what you did with this. It's because, we live in a world where everything has become 100% absolutist. You're either 100% with me or you're 100% against me. And it doesn't leave room, at least modern society doesn't leave room for, personal experience versus shared experience versus understanding somebody else's experience because they have a different lived ideology than you have.
True.
And so even in this documentary on a micro scale, you show the different perspectives in what a personal lived experience goes through and how and why certain people would do things versus what other people would have done. And I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I think that's kind of the fun of making a documentary is to not have it be black and white and not have it be this is the answer and this is what you do, and show some different perspectives and maybe build empathy. But that's part of it, the education I think we get from documentaries is, oh, I can empathize with somebody else's life. And maybe that makes me a little bit cooler, a little bit nicer in my day-to-day. I mean, hopefully a little bit.
Unless you're Michael Moore and Matt Walsh and just screaming in your own echo chamber. But
hopefully I don't become that.
Listen, we had to pick on both sides. We can't just pick on one side because both sides do that.
Absolutely. When it comes to if you talk politics, right, it is very, this or that. I tend to be issue based, like, hey, this is what's important to me. And that's where I find we can have consensus, because my parents and I sit on different sides, quote unquote, but on issues, it's usually the same.
Right.
And so that's just where I focus. And I'm like, forget the parties, forget the candidates. What about issues? Oh, we usually want similar things.
Right.
And so maybe this film can help bridge the political divide. Yeah, isn't that a huge ask?
Listen, we talk about political issues to comic issues. I mean,
Sure.
issue 1 through 400 something. I mean, that's a huge deal right there. Every time you make a documentary, you learn something about yourself as a filmmaker. In here, you learn something about your dad and how it could enhance your relationship with him. What did you learn about yourself as a person in this regard?
Yeah, I learned one that to empathize. I think I found a lot more empathy for stress and anxiety and how prevalent it is, and how I'm not going to say forced, because I think we're responsible where we can change it. That's really the theme of the film, is that we're responsible. We can change the way we value ourselves and see ourselves. But I really empathized with, when you go through years of conditioning, be it society or parents, it's hard to shake that. It's really hard to shake that. So it's easy to say, oh, meditate or do this, but that stuff is deep and it's programming. And so I think I grew a lot on the empathy side of things. And the other is I feel like I had to find like a fifth or sixth gear when it comes to filmmaking and leading a charge, because when the main character is having big doubts about doing the film and whether or not this is beneficial for him, and too fast and hurting and too much to show, I think I had to go to another gear to really trust that what I was doing was the right thing. To kind of lead a pilgrimage while I'm going through it, and that was not easy. There was many weekends where it was just like, okay, let's just feel this and let it and see what happens in a few days, rather than react, because there was very tough times that we couldn't go into detail in the film.
All right, I'm going to leave you with this, since you said you're a lot like your grandfather, where if it's not functional, it doesn't really have a space for you. But we're going to put it like this, since you're not a collector. Is there one item, a sentimental piece, whatever it is, that if the house caught fire, God forbid, that you'd have to run in and get, whether it's a family heirloom or a personal item or some sort of personal connection, just one item?
My cat, I would grab, of course, but I think that's not that. Your question is not that. Yeah, I think I would. I think I would grab. There's a Buddha statue that's the irony of like detachment, and yet I would grab the Buddha. There's one specific Buddha that I got in my first or second trip to India, and there's a certain like little scarf on it that I was given by an oracle in the high Himalayas. She was could channel. And it just reminds me of my first documentary, and it reminds me of some things that she said and lessons I learned there. So that even photos and stuff is not a huge deal to me, but I think I would do that. I'm looking around my house right now saying, what would I, Nowadays, it's more like your laptop because it has all your work in it, all your
Right.
creations.
Right. Yeah, that's your work thing, but the personal item would be this Buddha from India that you got. All right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I dig it. Adam, where can we find you and Selling Superman on social media that we can connect with you, and remind us where we can watch it now?
Yeah, first where you can watch it, Apple, Amazon, Google Play, just search, Selling Superman, or go to sellingsuperman.com. We have links to everything. If people are worldwide where, you're outside of the English language, we have a special edition on our website also that's worldwide. You get the bonus features. You can see my dad if you want to, a special Q&A with Ash Crossan, who's a great interviewer from E! And then you can find us on social media at Selling Superman Film. And then my personal is at I2I Productions, letter I, number 2, letter I Productions. You can see all the 9 different documentary projects I've done. And some of those are in India, in the Himalayas, and on motorcycles and crazy shit like that.
I dig it. Yeah, I'm not a motorcycle guy, but it'd be interesting to see what went on in the Himalayas. Adam, listen, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time with everything. Selling Superman is absolutely fantastic, whether you're a collector or not, or trying to process the grief of a lost family member and situational instances. I really appreciate everything today. And if I don't talk to you before then, have a happy Thanksgiving.